This is Mexico City, and I'm going to show you exactly how much it costs to visit this beautiful city for 5 days and 4 nights. Now, the currency in Mexico is pesos, but I'll convert all the prices to US dollars just to make it easy. Also, I was traveling with my wife on this trip, but I will try to separate out the costs that were just for me, like the food that I ate. For things like the hotel or paying for Ubers to get around the city, though, you would have to pay for those regardless of whether you were traveling solo or with other people, so I'm not going to divide those expenses in half. All right, let's get to it. All right, let's start with transportation. My flight from Panama City to Mexico City cost $422 US. Of course, you'll have to budget based on wherever you're traveling from. The Uber to get from the airport to my hotel downtown cost $15, but that was definitely the most expensive Uber trip that I took in Mexico City. And as for getting around town, honestly, Uber is the best way. It's cheap, safe, and super convenient. Of course, you can take taxis, but it's a little less convenient, and I've heard some stories of situations that you might want to avoid. You can also use buses and the metro, but in my opinion, they're less convenient and not that much cheaper, so it's worth it just to use Uber for the convenience. And something else to note is that Mexico City is massive, and sometimes the traffic can be really bad, so it's important to factor that in before you try to go anywhere, especially if you're trying to be on time. In total, I spent $124 on Ubers to get to and from the airports and also to get around Mexico City. So when you add that to the cost of the flight, the total transportation cost for my entire trip was $546. Now, I'm staying here in the Hyatt Regency in the Polanco neighborhood. It costs $226 per night, so for 4 nights in total, that's $904 on accommodation. And it would have cost $70 per night to upgrade to a room with 1 bed instead of 2, so that's why my wife and I are sleeping in separate beds. But it's a really nice hotel with tons of amenities like a pool, a gym, tennis court, a green wall, cozy nooks to hang out or do work in, 6 elevators, a grand lobby, complimentary umbrellas, and not 1, not 2, but 3 restaurants. And don't forget the overpriced snacks. No, seriously, this snack-sized bag of chips right here costs over $7. Of course, there are cheaper options. For example, if you were willing to stay in a hostel in a bunk bed in a dorm room, then you could do that for about $10 per night. I would say there's also a level between the hostel bunk bed and the Hyatt, where you could probably find a hotel for around $80 to $150 US per night. That's gonna be a nice boutique hotel. And if you are the type of traveler that likes to splash out for luxury accommodations, then you can find places running $500+ per night. For example, the St. Regis, Casa Palanca, or the Four Seasons Hotel. With transportation and accommodations out of the way, let's get to the fun parts, starting with food and beverages. Because let's be honest, one of the best parts about visiting Mexico City is the food and the tequila. On the budget-friendly side of things, you can get street food from stalls like this for a couple of dollars. I was a little scared of some of these places, to be honest, but you can also get delicious food like this. You can get an entire taco platter for just over $10. I also bought some snacks from the grocery store to save money on things like breakfast. Of course, we also went to some really nice and definitely more expensive places to eat as well, like Husset, where the meal cost around $60, but I got bacon-wrapped shrimp, a Mexican chicken in tomato sauce dish, and a delicious mezcal cocktail. Also, the vibes of this restaurant were incredible. Another memorable stop was Lardo in the Condesa neighborhood, which is an open concept restaurant with a lot of bar seating where I had seafood fried rice and a drink for around $22. A final highlight was Porfirio's in Polanco, where we had tuna tartare, tuna steaks, beef steaks, and palomitas for $52 per person. And if you feel like spending big money, you can even go to world-class restaurants like Pujol, which is a Michelin-starred restaurant that is known to be the best in Latin America. In total on this trip, I spent $305 on food and drinks just for me. For a 5-day trip, you could easily get by on a fraction of that budget. But like I said, I love food, and the culinary scene in Mexico is incredible. Now, there are options for activities for people of all price points in Mexico City. Personally, when I get to a new city, I love walking around and exploring the different neighborhoods, which obviously is free. And I spent an entire day just walking around Mexico City and taking in some of the most significant monuments like the Central Town Square or the Palace of Fine Arts. Or you can visit the Castle of Chapultepec, where you can see the National History Museum. Entry to the museum is only 90 pesos or about $5 US, and it's absolutely worth it because you get to see an incredible palace with beautiful gardens and an interesting museum that has artifacts from important moments in Mexican history. Another budget-friendly activity worth doing is going to see the mariachis perform in the Garibaldi Plaza. You can go watch from the sidelines for free, or you can pay a few dollars to be personally serenaded. Another thing that's high up on most lists of must-do activities in Mexico City is to visit the Frida Kahlo Museum, who is an icon of Mexican art. Unfortunately, it turns out the museum is closed on Mondays, which I, being an idiot, didn't look for in advance, so I can't go in today. Near the Frida Kahlo Museum is the Mercado de Coyoacán, which is a massive market that has food and souvenirs, so it's definitely fun to explore if you're in the mood for a little shopping. One excursion you absolutely have to do when coming to Mexico City is visit the ruins of Teotihuacan. Here you can see the ancient Temple of the Moon and the Temple of the Sun. Now, I took a guided tour in a small bus with about 10 other people, and it cost $42 per person. Of course, you can do it a lot more cheaply, and you can just take a public transit bus to get here, but in my opinion, taking the guided tour is worth it because it's convenient, you don't have to worry about any of the logistics, and then you have the guide that walks around with you and explains the history of what you're seeing. Although, of course, just being here and seeing this is spectacular, even if you have no idea what you're looking at. Now, for nighttime activities, I attended a Lucha Libre Mexican wrestling show, which is absolutely iconic and 100% super fun. It's really not expensive. Tickets were $8 per person to sit in the second section. You can pay a little bit more to be right at the front, or you can pay even less than that if you want to sit up in the nosebleeds. It's definitely worth it though. It's a great performance and super funny. In total, I only spent $55 on activity for this trip because a lot of the things that I did were either free or cheap, including a lot of the museums that I went to. So, in conclusion, how much did I spend in total on this trip to Mexico City? Well, for 5 days and 4 nights, I spent $1,810 altogether. Broken down by category, that's $546 on transportation, $904 on accommodations, $305 on food, and $55 on activities. But you could definitely do a very similar trip for around half that budget, especially if you cut on accommodations and a little bit on food. Or if you've got the dinero to blow, then you could scale that up with basically no limit. Mexico City is an incredible place to visit, and I highly recommend it, especially for people that are interested in food, culture, and history. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you want to find out how much it costs to retire here in Mexico, then click right here.